A 6-year-old girl stopped a billionaire outside a luxury restaurant and asked for one thing: soup, not for herself. What he discovered after following her home shattered his certainty about success, family, and belonging. One quiet promise would change 3 lives forever on a cold Chicago night of unexpected grace. Chicago at night looked like it always did: expensive, polished, untouchable. Graham Vale stepped out of Orion, a glass and steel restaurant suspended above the city, like a promise only a few could afford to believe in. The doors closed softly behind him, sealing away the hum of investors' handshakes and numbers that never slept. At 32, Graham was already a name people spoke with respect or fear. Founder, visionary, billionaire. The cold bit through his tailored coat as he adjusted the scarf at his neck. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the air, melting the moment they touched the glowing pavement. His phone buzzed. 3 unread emails. 2 missed calls. A reminder for tomorrow's board lunch. "Sam, give me 5 minutes," he said calmly into the phone. His driver acknowledged without question. The street was nearly empty. Luxury cars slept along the curb. Window displays glittered with things nobody truly needed. Graham exhaled, watching the vapor disappear into the night. That was when he heard it. A small voice. Careful, polite. "Excuse me, sir, please." He looked up. A little girl stood a few steps away, no more than 6 years old. She wore a faded red coat that swallowed her frame sleeves, falling past her wrists. Her brown hair was parted, neatly tied into 2 uneven braids. Snow clung to her boots. Graham's first instinct was to look away. The city trained you to do that. But something stopped him. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't crying. She wasn't reaching for money. She stood still, hands clasped together, eyes lifted with a quiet seriousness that didn't belong to someone so young. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said gently. "But could I please have a bowl of soup?" Graham blinked. Before he could respond, she added quickly, as if afraid of asking too much, "I promise I won't eat it all." Graham studied her in silence. In Chicago, even kindness required caution. Children begging were often part of something larger, something unsafe. He had been warned 100 times. His security team drilled it into him. Don't engage. Don't assume. Don't risk it. Yet the girl didn't fit the pattern. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't reaching for his coat. She stood at a respectful distance, waiting. "Why wouldn't you eat it?" Graham asked at last, lowering his phone. The girl hesitated, then answered with practiced honesty, "Because I need to take some to my grandma." Her voice didn't shake. She said it the way someone states a fact, not a plea. "She's not feeling very well tonight," the girl added. "And she gets tired if she doesn't eat." Graham frowned slightly. "Where are your parents?" The girl looked down just for a moment. "It's just me and Grandma," she said. "I help when I can." Something in her tone, calm, responsible, made his chest tighten. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mila," she replied, offering a small, careful smile. Mila rose. Graham glanced back toward the restaurant, its warm lights glowing through the glass. Inside, untouched plates were being cleared, half-eaten meals discarded without thought. "Wait here," he said suddenly. Mila's eyes widened. "I will, I promise." He returned less than 5 minutes later, carrying an insulated paper bag. Steam escaped from the top as he knelt slightly and handed it to her. "Vegetable soup," he said, "and fresh bread." Mila accepted it with both hands as if it were something precious. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. "Thank you so much." She didn't open the bag. She didn't taste a single bite. Instead, she hugged it gently to her chest, turned and began to walk away, slowly, carefully, like she was carrying something fragile. Graham watched her go, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he didn't call his driver. Mila didn't run. She walked with deliberate care, eyes focused ahead, one arm wrapped securely around the warm bag. Snow crunched softly beneath her boots. She moved like someone who understood responsibility far beyond her years. Graham stood there longer than he intended. His phone vibrated again. Sam waiting, the schedule pressing in. Normally, that would have been enough, but something felt unfinished. Why hadn't she eaten who was waiting for her? Why did a 6-year-old speak with such quiet certainty? Sam Graham said into the phone, eyes still fixed on the small red coat moving down the block. I'm going to be late. There was a pause. Understood, sir. Graham slipped the phone into his pocket and followed, keeping his distance. He told himself it was curiosity. Nothing more. Mila turned onto a dimmer street where the glow of luxury storefronts gave way to older buildings and family-run shops. A man sweeping his sidewalk looked up and waved at her. She waved back, smiling. A woman exiting a laundromat gently touched Mila's shoulder as she passed. They knew her. That unsettled him more than he expected. 10 minutes earlier, Graham had been surrounded by wealth and isolation. Now he was walking through a neighborhood that looked worn but cared for. Small houses, clean steps, potted plants wrapped in winter cloth. Mila stopped in front of a modest 2-story home with peeling white paint. Light glowed warmly from inside. She climbed the steps without hesitation and opened the door. "Grandma," she called softly as she went in. "I'm back." Graham stopped beneath a bare tree, heart beating faster. He hadn't planned to come this far. He should turn around. Instead, drawn by something he didn't yet understand, he took a step closer toward a window glowing with soft, yellow light. And as a familiar voice drifted through the glass, calm and gentle, "Did you get cold, my love?" Graham Vale felt 20 years disappear in a single breath. Graham should have turned away. Any rational adult would have. He was standing outside a stranger's home, peering toward a softly lit window, guided by nothing but an uneasy pull in his chest. Yet his feet refused to move. Inside, the small figure in the red coat carefully placed the bag of soup on a wooden table. She moved slowly, deliberately, as if afraid the warmth might spill out. "I'm back," Grandma Mila said. A woman's voice answered from deeper inside the house. "You took your time, sweetheart." I was starting to worry. The sound of that voice made Graham's breath catch. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It carried no urgency at all. It was gentle, familiar. The woman stepped into view, a slender figure in a faded blue sweater, gray hair pulled back neatly, movements, careful but composed. She approached Mila, brushing snow from the child's coat with tender precision, and in that instant, the world tilted. Evelyn. Graham whispered to himself the name, leaving his lips before he could stop it. Memory flooded him without permission. A younger version of himself, small and restless, running through echoing hallways. That same voice calling him to dinner. That same calm tone reading bedtime stories, teaching him to tie his shoes, reminding him softly that he was allowed to feel things. Evelyn Hart. The woman who had raised him when his own parents were always somewhere else. The woman who had vanished from his life without explanation when he was 10. Inside the house, Mila proudly opened the bag. "A very nice man gave us soup," she announced. "I told him I wouldn't eat any, just like you taught me." Evelyn paused, surprise flickering across her face. "Oh, Mila," she said gently. "You shouldn't ask strangers for food." "But you were tired," Mila replied, matter of fact. "And you said it's okay to ask for food when you really need it." Evelyn sighed, resting a hand on Mila's shoulder, torn between worry and pride. Outside, Graham felt something inside him crack open. This wasn't coincidence. This was unfinished history knocking on his chest, asking to be let back in. And without thinking any further, Graham Vale turned away from the window and walked to the front door. Graham raised his hand, then lowered it, then raised it again. He hadn't felt this uncertain in years. Not during acquisitions, not during public speeches, not even during crises that made headlines. This was different. Finally, he knocked 3 times, slow and deliberate. Footsteps approached. The door opened, Evelyn stood there, dish towel in hand, her polite smile already forming, until her eyes lifted. The smile vanished. Her breath caught. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "Graham," she whispered. He swallowed. "Hello, Evelyn." Time seemed to stretch, filled with everything they hadn't said for 2 decades. Her hand trembled slightly as she lowered it from the doorframe. Behind her, Mila peeked around the corner, eyes bright with curiosity. "Oh," she exclaimed. "It's the soup man." Graham couldn't help it. He smiled. "Yes," he said softly. "I guess it is." Evelyn looked between them, confusion mixing with dawning recognition. You gave her the soup," he nodded. She asked very politely. Mila beamed. "I told you he was kind." Evelyn stepped back, slowly opening the door wider. "Please, come in. It's cold out there." The house was modest but immaculate. Worn furniture carefully arranged. Children's drawings taped to the fridge. A sense of order born from care, not abundance. "Would you like some tea?" Evelyn asked, already moving toward the kettle. "We have chamomile. It's nothing fancy." "Chamomile would be perfect," Graham replied quickly. She paused just a second, then nodded. As he sat on the sofa, Mila climbed up beside him, holding a stack of colorful drawings. "These are mine," she said proudly. "Grandma puts them everywhere." "They're beautiful," Graham said honestly. Evelyn busied herself in the kitchen, but Graham noticed how she avoided looking directly at him. "Evelyn," he said gently. "I've thought about you for years." She stopped. "So have I," she answered quietly. "More than you know." The kettle whistled, breaking the silence. And in that simple sound, Graham realized this wasn't a reunion. It was a beginning he hadn't known he needed. They talked carefully at first. About the weather, about the neighborhood, about Mila's school and her love of drawing. Mila chatted easily, swinging her legs from the chair, while Evelyn poured tea with steady hands. "She's very bright," Graham said, watching the child describe a picture filled with suns and stick figures. "You've done an incredible job." Evelyn smiled, genuine but restrained. "She's the one who keeps me going." "Can I use your restroom?" Graham asked after a moment. "Of course," Evelyn replied. "Second door on the right." As he passed through the small kitchen, Graham's eyes fell on the refrigerator. Covered in drawings, magnets, tiny notes written in careful handwriting. Without opening it, he already knew. Still, he checked briefly, quietly. The shelves were nearly bare. A carton of milk, a few eggs, carrots, half a block of cheese. No shame, no chaos. Just careful rationing. Graham closed the door gently and stood there for a moment longer than necessary. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't failure. This was pride stretched thin. When he returned to the living room, Mila was sipping soup at the table, eyes closed in contentment. "It's the best soup ever," she announced. "Right," Grandma Evelyn laughed softly. "I think you're just very hungry." Graham sat back down, choosing his next words with care. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "I want to help." She stiffened slightly. "We're managing." "I can see that," he replied. "But managing doesn't mean you shouldn't have support." Her eyes met his, sharp and assessing. "I won't accept charity, Graham." He nodded immediately. "Then don't." She blinked. "I'm involved with a foundation," he continued. "We work with families, seniors, children. We need people who understand real life, not reports, not statistics." He held her gaze steady and respectful. "I'd like to hire you as a consultant." Silence filled the room. Mila looked between them, sensing the shift. Evelyn studied Graham's face for a long moment. Then slowly she said, "That is not what I expected." "Neither was tonight," Graham replied. And somewhere between a bowl of soup and an honest offer, the quiet work of healing began. The tea sat untouched for a moment. Steam curled upward between Graham and Evelyn like something unspoken, fragile. Mila hummed quietly as she colored, unaware that the air around the adults had shifted. You were always curious, Evelyn said at last, her eyes fixed on her cup. Even when you were little. Graham smiled faintly. I used to ask too many questions. You asked the right ones, she corrected. About why people were sad. About why your parents were always busy. About why silence felt heavier than noise. The words settled into him. Mila looked up. Were you a kid too? She asked, genuinely surprised. Graham laughed softly. Once. A long time ago. Evelyn finally met his eyes. I took care of you from when you were 5 until you were 10, she said, her voice calm but weighted. Those were important years. They were the only years I remember, clearly, Graham replied, before he could stop himself. Evelyn inhaled slowly. You were lonely, she said. Not because you lacked things, but because no one stayed long enough to know you. Graham's throat tightened. Mila tilted her head. Did Grandma read you stories too? She did, Graham said, smiling at the memory. Every night. Evelyn smiled despite herself. You always asked for one more, and you always said yes. She looked away quickly, blinking. I didn't disappear because I wanted to, Evelyn said quietly. Life doesn't always give warnings. Graham nodded. I know. For the first time, there was no bitterness in his voice, just understanding. Mila suddenly held up her drawing. This is you, she announced proudly. And this is Grandma. And this is me. We're holding soup. Graham stared at the simple lines and felt something shift deep inside him. You draw moments, he said gently. Mila beamed. Moments are important. Evelyn watched the two of them together, something like wonder softening her expression. For years, she had carried the memory of a quiet boy who needed her. Now, sitting in her small living room, she realized he still did. When Graham finally stood to leave, the clock on the wall read later than he expected. I should go, he said reluctantly. It's been a long day. Mila's face fell instantly. Already, Evelyn placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Graham has responsibilities, sweetheart. I know, Mila said. But I like when he's here. The honesty landed without malice. So do I, Evelyn admitted quietly. Graham stepped into the cold night, but the city felt different now. Less sharp, less distant. At the corner, Sam opened the car door. Everything all right, sir? Graham hesitated. No, he said, then corrected himself. Yes, I think something important just happened. The drive back to his penthouse passed in silence. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling glass, a skyline that obeyed him. Yet the moment he stepped inside, the quiet felt wrong. Too large, too empty. He poured himself a drink, then didn't touch it. Instead, he stood by the window, imagining a small kitchen with a humming kettle, a child's laughter, a woman who noticed when silence hurt. He hadn't felt that kind of presence in years. His phone rang. Nora, he answered. You missed the charity dinner, she said gently. Mrs. Pike was asking for you. I know, Graham replied. Double the donation. A pause. Everything okay? I need you to research assistance programs, he said. For seniors. For children. Quietly. Understood. After the call, Graham sat on the edge of his bed. For the first time, his wealth didn't feel like power. It felt like responsibility he'd been avoiding. Across the city, in a modest bedroom, Mila lay beside her grandmother. Do you think he'll come back? She asked sleepily. Evelyn hesitated. I don't know, my love. Mila yawned. He has sad eyes, like someone who lost something. Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling the truth in those words. Yes, she whispered. He does. Morning arrived quietly. Snow melted into slush. The city woke without ceremony. At 9 sharp, a black car stopped 2 blocks from Evelyn's house. Graham stepped out wearing jeans, a gray sweater, no coat with a logo. In his hands were 2 paper bags, ordinary unmarked. One held groceries, the other winter clothes. "Come back in 2 hours," he told Sam. He walked the rest of the way alone. Mela opened the door before he could knock. Her eyes widened. "You came." She didn't shout. She didn't jump. She simply smiled like she had expected it all along. Evelyn appeared behind her, surprised but composed. "Graham, we weren't expecting, I know," he said gently. "I hope that's okay." Mela grabbed his hand and pulled him inside. "Grandma, it's the soup man." Evelyn sighed softly. "Mela." "It's fine," Graham said, smiling. "I don't mind." He set the bags on the table. "Just groceries," he added quickly. "And some warm things. Nothing extravagant." Evelyn looked inside. Practical items. Thoughtful choices. "You didn't have to," she said. "I wanted to," he replied. "And if you decide not to keep them, that's okay too." Mela held up a red coat. "Grandma, it's my color." Evelyn's resistance softened, not broken, just eased. She met Graham's eyes. "You're careful," she said. "With you," he answered. Mela slipped on the coat, spinning. "Do I look brave? You look warm," Evelyn said, smiling. Graham watched them and realized something quietly, irrevocably important. This wasn't charity. This wasn't nostalgia. This was connection choosing him back. And for the first time in his adult life, Graham Vale understood. Some returns are not about money. They are about staying. Breakfast happened without planning it. Evelyn poured tea again. Mela sat at the table in her new red coat, refusing to take it off even indoors. "I'll wear it to school forever," she declared. Evelyn laughed softly. Even in summer, especially in summer. Graham watched them, feeling like a guest in a life that somehow already knew him. "Evelyn," he said carefully when Mila was busy drawing at the corner of the table about what I mentioned last night. She stiffened slightly. "I told you I don't accept charity." "I know," he replied calmly. "That's why I didn't offer it." She raised an eyebrow, waiting. "The Vale Trust is expanding a program for families and seniors," Graham continued. "We've spent millions, built buildings, funded initiatives." He paused. "But too often we miss what actually matters day to day." Evelyn studied him, sharp and perceptive. "You want my opinion?" she said. "I need it," he corrected. "You've lived this. You know what helps and what just looks good on paper. And what does this need come with?" she asked. "A consulting contract," Graham answered without hesitation. "Flexible hours, fair pay, full transparency." Silence filled the room. Mela looked up. "Does that mean Grandma works with you?" "It means," Graham said gently, "that your grandma helps people." Mela nodded solemnly. "She already does that." Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. "You always were good with words," she said. "Even when you were a boy." "This isn't about words," Graham replied. "It's about respect." She exhaled slowly. "I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking." Mela walked over holding a drawing. It showed 3 figures standing under a roof. "This is you coming back," she explained. "And this is Grandma, and this is me not being cold." Graham swallowed. "It's perfect," he said. As he left that morning, Evelyn stood in the doorway watching him go, not with suspicion but with something more dangerous. Hope. The days that followed settled into a quiet rhythm. Graham visited after work, not every night, not intrusively, just enough to matter. Mela waited for the sound of his steps like it was part of the day's structure. One afternoon, the school office called him. "Mr. Vale." "This is Hampton Elementary. Mela Rose hasn't been picked up yet." Graham checked the time. Evelyn was never late. "I'm on my way," he said immediately. When he arrived, Mela sat calmly on a small chair, backpack on her knees. She looked up when she saw him. "Grandma didn't come." "I know," he said, crouching to her level. "We'll go check on her together." She nodded, trusting him without question. At the house, the door was locked. Graham used the spare key Evelyn had reluctantly given him just in case. Grandma Mila called gently as they stepped inside. No answer. They found Evelyn resting on her bed, pale, breathing shallowly but conscious. "Oh," she murmured. "I didn't mean to worry you." "You didn't," Graham said calmly, already calling for medical help. "We're just being careful." Mila held her grandmother's hand. "You promised you'd eat the soup today." Evelyn smiled weakly. "I will, my love." The adults arrived quickly, responsibly, quietly. At the hospital, Mila sat beside Graham, swinging her legs slightly. "Is Grandma in trouble?" she asked. "She's being taken care of," Graham replied. "That's what matters." Mila nodded, then asked softly, "Can you stay until she wakes up?" "Yes," he said without pause. "I'll stay." For the first time, Graham noticed something unsettling. He wasn't anxious about work. He wasn't checking his phone. He was exactly where he needed to be. The hospital room was quiet. Machines hummed softly. Doctors spoke in low, reassuring tones. Evelyn was stable resting. Graham sat with Mila in the waiting area, a paper cup of juice between her hands. She stared at the floor for a long moment. "Ethan," she stopped herself. "I mean, Graham." He smiled gently. "You can call me Graham," she nodded. "If Grandma has to stay here, who will tuck me in?" The question landed without drama, without fear, just honesty. Graham felt something inside him give way. "I will," he said simply. Mila looked up, searching his face. "Every night?" "Yes." She considered this carefully, then held out her little finger. "Pinky promise." He hooked his finger with hers. "Pinky promise." Later, when Evelyn woke briefly, she found Graham sitting nearby. "You didn't have to stay," she murmured. "I wanted to," he replied. "And I'm not going anywhere." She studied him, really looked at him for the first time as an adult. "You've changed," she said. He nodded. "So have you." When Mila was finally ready to sleep in the quiet family room, she leaned against him. "Grandma says families don't always start the same way," she whispered. "She's right," Graham said. Mila smiled, eyes closing. "Ours started with soup." Graham held still, afraid to break the moment. In that simple sentence, he understood the truth he had spent his life avoiding. Success had given him power, but presence gave him meaning. And for the first time, Graham Vale wasn't afraid of what staying might cost him. He was afraid of what leaving would. Evelyn was discharged 2 days later. Not with drama, not with miracles, just steady care, clear instructions, and the kind of calm professionalism that made everything feel manageable. Graham insisted on following every guideline to the letter. Hydration, rest, medication schedule written in large print, follow-up appointment already booked. He drove them home himself, the back seat quiet except for Mila's soft humming. She cradled her sketchbook like it was a sleeping pet. When they entered the house, Evelyn paused at the doorway, as if she needed to confirm the place still belonged to her. She took a breath, then stepped inside with her chin lifted. "I'm fine," she said, as if her pride required the sentence. "I know," Graham replied gently. "That's why we're not pretending you're not tired." Mila tugged on Evelyn's sleeve. "Grandma, sit. I'm the boss today." Evelyn tried not to smile. "You're always the boss." Mila carefully placed a blanket over Evelyn's shoulders like a ceremony. Then she turned to Graham with a seriousness that looked borrowed from adulthood. "Do you have to go now?" Graham glanced at Evelyn before answering. He wasn't going to decide the rules in her house. Evelyn's gaze stayed on the floor for a beat too long. "He has work," she said quietly, but it sounded less like a reminder and more like a warning to herself. Graham understood. Evelyn had lived long enough to know that good things could be temporary. "I can stay a little," he said, "if that's okay." Evelyn's eyes lifted. "A little," she agreed. "Not because we need it, because Mila wants it." Mila beamed. "Correct." They made soup together, simple, careful, quiet. Graham washed dishes without being asked. Evelyn watched him from the table the way a person watches weather change. Not suspicious, just studying. When Mila disappeared into the hallway to put away her crayons, Evelyn spoke in a lower voice. "You didn't have to rearrange your life for us," she said. "I haven't rearranged it," Graham answered. "I'm seeing it clearly for the first time." Evelyn's hands tightened slightly around her teacup. "Don't romanticize this," she warned. "We are not a lesson. We are not a charity photo." Graham didn't flinch. "I know." "Then understand," she continued the words, precise and controlled. "I have raised Mila with dignity. If you come into her life like a bright light and then disappear, it will not be harmless." The sentence was firm, but not threatening. It was an adult boundary stated responsibly. Graham exhaled slowly. "You're right," he said. "That's why I'm trying to do this correctly." Evelyn's expression softened by a fraction. "Correctly," she repeated. "I want to earn my place," he said. "Not buy it." Silence settled between them, heavy but honest. Then Mila reappeared, holding a drawing she'd made while no one was looking. She marched to the table and placed it down like evidence. The picture showed a small house with a bright yellow window. Outside the door stood a tall stick figure with a scarf holding a paper bag. "This is when you came back," Mila announced. "This is the best part." Graham stared at the drawing, then at Evelyn, whose eyes had gone strangely shiny. Mila pointed to a tiny figure in the window. "That's Grandma. She's warm." Evelyn cleared her throat. "Mila, sweetheart." But Mila wasn't done. She leaned closer to Graham and whispered as if sharing a secret. "Sometimes Grandma smiles with her mouth, but not with her eyes." Graham felt his chest tighten. A child's observation, simple, innocent, painfully accurate. Mila looked up at him, "But she smiled with her eyes when you were here." Evelyn's head turned away quickly, as if she needed the wall to hold her expression. Graham didn't reach for her hand. He didn't push. He simply said, quiet and steady, "I'm not here to take over. I'm here to show up." Evelyn's shoulders lowered by the smallest amount. And in that small release, Graham sensed the real conflict, the one that would keep the audience watching. Not whether he could help them, but whether Evelyn would let herself believe he would stay. The Vale Trust headquarters didn't feel like warmth. It felt like glass, clean lines, quiet efficiency. Photos on the walls of smiling families beside ribbon cuttings and polished plaques. Everything looked like success, measured, documented, branded. Evelyn noticed it the moment the elevator doors opened. She adjusted the handle of her worn purse, as if to remind herself she belonged to no one's display. Mila bounced at her side in her red coat, staring at the lobby like it was a museum. "Grandma, look, a fish tank." Evelyn managed a small smile. "Eyes forward, boss." Nora Pike met them with a calm, welcoming expression. "Mrs. Hart, Mila, welcome. Mr. Vale asked me to personally guide you." Evelyn nodded once. "Thank you." Nora opened a door to a bright children's room filled with books, puzzles, and soft chairs. Two trained caregivers sat with a small group of kids. Everything was clean, safe, and calm. Mila's eyes widened. "Can I?" "Yes," Nora said warmly. "And there are snacks in a bit." Evelyn crouched slightly to Mila's level. "Same rule," she said. "If you need me, you ask an adult. You stay in the room." Mila put two fingers to her forehead like a soldier. "Yes, ma'am." When Evelyn stepped into the conference room, Graham was already there, no suit today, just a simple blazer. He rose immediately. "Evelyn," he said, voice respectful, "I'm glad you came." She didn't respond to the warmth. Not yet. She only looked at the table folders, printed agreements, a nameplate that read, "Evelyn Hart, Community Consultant." It was the first time in years anyone had written her name as something other than a bill recipient. 3 staff members greeted her politely. They asked for her insight, real questions, not performative ones. How do we improve after-school tutoring retention? What's the biggest barrier for seniors accessing care? What do families actually need that our programs miss? Evelyn answered slowly at first, careful not to sound like an imposter. Then she began to speak the way she spoke to Mila, plainly, kindly, with practical truth. Food, she said. Not fancy. Just consistent. Hungry children can't focus. One woman blinked as if surprised by the simplicity. Then she started taking notes. Evelyn continued. Transportation for seniors, flexible schedules, and respect. Don't talk to people like they're problems. Graham watched her, something almost fierce in his eyes, not pride in himself, but pride in her. When the meeting ended, the staff left with thanks and enthusiasm, already discussing action items. Evelyn remained standing. Graham closed the door gently behind the last person. You were incredible, he said. Evelyn shook her head. I said common sense. Common sense is rare in boardrooms, he replied. Her gaze sharpened. Is this real, or is this you trying to repay guilt? There it was, the tension line. The one that could cut. Graham didn't dodge. It started as guilt, he admitted quietly. But it isn't that anymore. Evelyn's eyes stayed fixed on him. Then what is it? He hesitated, and in that hesitation the audience would lean forward. It's recognition, he said. That you mattered, that you still matter, that Mila matters, and that I've lived a life that looks full but feels empty. Evelyn's breath left her slowly. Then her tone hardened again, not cruel, just protective. Don't use a child to fill your emptiness. I won't, Graham said immediately. That's why this is a contract. That's why this is structured. That's why everything is slow. Evelyn studied him, searching for manipulation. She found none, only something she hadn't seen in his childhood because he'd been too young to name it. Need. They walked to the children's room together. Mela was kneeling beside another girl building a tower of blocks. When she saw them, she ran over, cheeks pink with excitement. Grandma, they have a library, and I made a friend. Evelyn's face softened at that. Graham crouched slightly. Did you follow the rules? Mila nodded rapidly. Yes. I asked an adult where the bathroom was, like you taught me. Evelyn's eyes flicked to Graham, surprise passing through her expression. He'd asked the right question, safety, not control. As they left the building, Mila slipped her small hand into Graham's without thinking. Evelyn saw it, and the tension didn't come from anger. It came from one terrifying thought. If this bond grew too deep, it would require an answer from Graham that no contract could guarantee. Evelyn tried to return home that night. She really did. But the doctor's instructions were clear: rest monitoring, no pushing herself. Nora arranged a visiting nurse for check-ins, and Evelyn's pride rose like a shield until Mila's small voice cut through it. Grandma, Mila said quietly, if you get tired again, I want Graham to help. Evelyn looked down at her granddaughter. Mila wasn't begging. She wasn't frightened. She was simply trying to keep their little world steady. Evelyn turned to Graham. This is temporary, she said. Yes, he answered. Temporary with structure. A nurse. A schedule. Your rules. Evelyn's jaw tightened. My rules. Always, Graham said. So Evelyn agreed reluctantly, carefully, to stay at Graham's penthouse for a short recovery window. When they arrived, the doors opened to marble glass, and silence so clean it felt sterilized. Mila stepped in and whispered, It echoes. Graham's throat tightened. It won't, he said, and he meant it more than he understood. A nurse greeted them, professional, calm, respectful. Evelyn was shown to a comfortable room that had been prepared without extravagance. Fresh linens, a warm lamp, water on the nightstand. No show. Mila stood in the hallway looking around. Where do I sleep? She asked softly. Graham led her to a door that used to be his office. "Close your eyes," he said. Mila obeyed instantly, trusting him like the promise she carried. He opened the door. "Okay. Look." Mila gasped. The gray walls had been painted a soft, warm yellow. A small canopy bed sat in the center, with a star-shaped nightlight. A low bookshelf with children's books. A small art table with clean paper and colored pencils. A blank board on the wall waiting for her drawings. Mila ran in, slowly, hands hovering over everything, like she was afraid it would vanish if she touched it. "Is this real?" she whispered. "It's yours," Graham said, "for as long as you need." Mila turned, eyes shining. "It smells like new paper." Graham laughed softly. "That's a good smell." Evelyn appeared in the doorway, supported by the nurse. She took in the room, the thoughtfulness, the restraint, the lack of arrogance. For the first time, she looked truly shaken. "You did this overnight," she said. Graham nodded. "I've built entire companies faster than I should have," he admitted. "This, I wanted to do right." Evelyn's voice dropped. "She'll get attached." Graham didn't pretend otherwise. "I know." Mila suddenly held up a pencil set like it was a crown. "Grandma, look, 72 colors." Evelyn's eyes filled. She blinked hard. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Mila ran to Evelyn and hugged her carefully, like she understood her grandmother needed gentleness. Then Mila looked back at Graham. "Can you read tonight?" Graham froze for half a heartbeat because reading bedtime stories was not something billionaire schedules prepared you for. But he remembered Evelyn's voice from his childhood. The calm, the patience. "Yes," he said, and it sounded like a vow. That night, after 2 stories and 1 glass of water and a perfectly negotiated 1 more page, Mila fell asleep under the starlight. Graham stepped out to the balcony, Chicago glittering below him. His phone buzzed with a dozen messages he didn't open. Behind the glass, his apartment no longer looked like a showroom. It looked like a place where someone lived. Evelyn joined him quietly, wrapped in a light shawl. "You're doing too much," she said. Graham shook his head. "For the first time, I think I'm doing what matters." Evelyn stared out at the city, then spoke with a softness that carried more weight than any accusation. "Graham," she said, "Mila doesn't need a hero." He looked at her. "She needs someone who stays." Graham's voice was barely above the wind. "Then I'll stay," he said. And in that moment, silent, simple, lawful, safe, the story crossed its true point of no return. Not a rescue, a commitment. The penthouse changed faster than Graham expected. Not in furniture or paint, those were easy. It changed in sound. Soft footsteps in the morning. A child's humming drifting down the hall. The gentle clink of a spoon against a mug as Evelyn measured medicine like it was a sacred routine. Even the air felt warmer, as if the apartment itself had stopped holding its breath. Graham tried to keep everything steady. He set boundaries with his staff. He asked Nora to schedule meetings tighter to protect evenings. He learned Mila's bedtime rules: 2 stories, 1 glass of water, and a final check that the starlight was on. But healing never arrives in a straight line. One afternoon, Graham came home early and heard voices from the hallway. Evelyn was speaking softly to Nurse Chen, unaware he'd returned. "It's temporary," Evelyn said. "I appreciate his help, but Mila can't build her world around a man who has 1,000 exits." Nurse Chen answered gently. "He seems sincere." Evelyn's voice lowered. "Sincere isn't the same as permanent." Graham froze. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't angry. It was responsible. But it hit him like a cold draft through an open window. He stepped back quietly, choosing not to interrupt. In his chest, a familiar old feeling stirred, being useful, admired, but never truly chosen. That evening, Mila ran into his arms as usual. "You're back, I'm back," he echoed, smiling for her. Evelyn watched from the doorway, careful and composed. "Dinner is ready," she said, as if nothing had happened. They ate together, simple food, real conversation. Mila talked about a book she wanted to read. Evelyn listened, nodding at the right moments. Graham laughed when Mila described a classroom science experiment that was mostly glitter. But underneath, Graham felt the words repeating temporary, 1,000 exits. Sincere isn't permanent. Later, after Mila fell asleep, Graham found Evelyn in the kitchen rinsing a cup that was already clean. "Evelyn," he said quietly. She didn't turn. "Yes, I heard you today." The dish paused in her hands. For a moment, the entire apartment went still. Evelyn set the cup down carefully and faced him. "Then you heard the truth." Graham swallowed. "You think I'll leave?" Evelyn's eyes didn't soften. "Not yet. I think life has trained Mila to lose people without warning. I won't let her learn that lesson again." Graham nodded slowly, absorbing it. "What do you want from me?" he asked, voice steady but vulnerable. Evelyn took a long breath. "I want you to be honest about what you can do, not what you feel tonight. What you can do when work gets loud again." Graham's hands clenched, then relaxed. "I can't promise perfection," he said, "but I can promise presence with structure, with responsibility, with consistency." Evelyn studied him, measuring his words like she measured medicine. "And if one day you can't?" she asked. Graham didn't reach for drama. He didn't offer a grand vow. He offered the only thing that could earn trust. "Then I'll tell you before it hurts her," he said. "I won't disappear." Evelyn's shoulders lowered by a fraction. It wasn't forgiveness. It was the first crack in the wall. The next week brought a new kind of test. Mila's school held a small family reading morning. Parents and guardians invited to sit in the classroom, listen to children read, then share a short story of their own. Graham had promised Mila he would come. He had also promised his board he would attend a high-level merger meeting scheduled for the same time. Nora brought him the conflict like a bomb set gently on his desk. "Both are confirmed," she said carefully. "The board meeting can't be moved. The school event is in 2 hours." Graham stared at the calendar, the old version of him already reaching for the easiest answer. Then he thought of Mila's quiet certainty. "You'll tuck me in." He stood. "Move the merger meeting," he said. Nora blinked. "Sir, make it virtual. I'll join after the school event," Graham continued. "If they can't wait 90 minutes, they don't respect me, or the deal." Nora's expression changed, not to flattery, but to understanding. "Yes, sir." At school, Graham felt oddly exposed in his simple sweater, stepping through hallways that smelled like crayons and floor polish. He expected to feel out of place. Instead, Mila sprinted to him like he was the most natural part of her world. "You came," she whispered, grabbing his hand. Evelyn walked behind them, slower now, but steadier, her posture proud. She didn't take Graham's kindness for granted. She watched what he did with it. Inside the classroom, Graham sat on a tiny plastic chair among other adults. His knees looked ridiculous. Mila glowed with delight. Mr. Vale, Mila's teacher, said warmly, "Thank you for joining us." Graham smiled. "I wouldn't miss it." Mila read aloud with serious concentration, finger tracking each word. When she finished, she looked up, eyes searching for one person. Graham clapped first. Not loud, just steady, certain. Mila's shoulders relaxed. She had been brave, and she had been seen. Later, the teacher invited adults to share a short story. Graham hadn't prepared anything. Evelyn glanced at him, calm, curious. Graham took a breath and began, not with business, not with triumph. "When I was little," he said, "someone read to me every night. She taught me that being strong doesn't mean being silent. And I forgot that for a long time." His voice didn't shake, but it softened. "Then I met Mila, and she reminded me." The room went quiet, not sad, just attentive. Mila stared at him as if he'd revealed a secret treasure. On the walk back to the car, Mila squeezed his hand. "You told a real story," she said. Graham nodded. "I'm trying to live one." Evelyn didn't speak, but her eyes held a new kind of acknowledgement. Not gratitude. Respect. That night, rain tapped softly against the penthouse windows. Evelyn rested in her chair with a blanket watching Mila draw at the coffee table. Graham sat nearby, laptop closed for once, letting the quiet exist without filling it. Mila hummed, tongue peeking out slightly as she worked. Then she announced, "I'm making something important." Evelyn smiled. "Everything you make is important. It's extra important," Mila insisted. When she finished, she marched over to Graham and placed the paper in his hands like a legal document. It was a drawing of 3 stick figures in front of a house. One tall, one medium, one small. The small one stood in the middle holding both hands. Above them, a giant sun smiled. "That's us," Mila said proudly. "And the sun is because you make the days less gray." Graham's throat tightened. "It's beautiful," he managed. Mila tilted her head, studying him. "Why do you look like you're thinking too hard?" Graham gave a small laugh. "Because I am." Evelyn watched quietly, knowing Mila's next words might land deeper than any adult conversation. Mila tapped the paper. "Grandma says families can look different." "She's right," Graham said. Mila's voice dropped to a gentle seriousness. "So, are you my family?" The question wasn't dramatic. It wasn't desperate. It was simply the most honest thing a child could ask. Evelyn's breath caught. She didn't interrupt. This was Mila's moment, and she deserved truth with care. Graham didn't answer fast. He looked at Evelyn first, seeking permission to step into territory that belonged to her, and Mila not to him. Evelyn nodded once, slow and steady. Graham turned back to Mila. "I care about you," he said. "And I care about Grandma. I want to be in your life in a real way." Mila blinked. "Forever," Graham took a breath, the adult version of a pinky promise. "Forever means I show up," he said gently. "Again and again. Even when it's hard. Even when I'm busy. I choose you." Mila's face brightened like a lamp. She climbed into his lap and hugged him tight, warm, trusting. Evelyn watched the embrace with eyes that shone, then quickly looked away, pretending to fix her blanket. Graham held Mila carefully, as if he finally understood what he was holding. Not a child. A future. And the next step would be the hardest one, because now the story wasn't about soup. It was about belonging. And belonging always demands proof. Evelyn recovered steadily. Not overnight, not miraculously, just the quiet way strength returns when it's given time and care. The doctor cleared her to resume daily routines slowly with structure. Graham followed every instruction without question. One evening after Mila had gone to bed, Evelyn asked Graham to sit with her at the kitchen table. "I need to know something," she said calmly. Graham nodded. "Ask." "When I'm fully well," Evelyn continued. "Mila and I will return to our home, our routine, our independence." The words landed gently but firmly. Graham felt his chest tighten, yet he didn't argue. "I understand." Evelyn studied him. "If we leave, will you still come, not with gifts, not with plans, with time?" "Yes," Graham said immediately. "And if work pulls you away, I'll tell Mila in advance. I'll come back when I say I will." Evelyn leaned back, watching him closely. "No disappearing." "No disappearing," he repeated. She nodded once. "Then this is my test." "What has he asked?" "That you let us go, without pulling us closer to keep us." Graham absorbed that quietly. This was trust built on respect, not fear. "I'll walk you home myself," he said. "When you're ready." Evelyn's eyes softened, not with relief but with belief. Then she said gently, "I think you're ready for what you're choosing." The move back happened on a clear morning. Graham carried boxes, not expensive ones, just books, drawings, blankets. He didn't rush. He didn't direct. He followed Evelyn's pace. Mela supervised carefully. "This goes by my bed," she said. "This stays with Grandma. This comes back with you." "With me?" Graham asked, smiling. Mela nodded seriously. "For when you visit," he swallowed. "I will." At the door of the small house, Evelyn turned to him. "You kept your word." "So did you," he replied. Mela hugged him tightly. "You're still my family," she said, not asking, stating. "Yes," Graham answered. "I am." Weeks passed. Graham came every Wednesday evening, Sunday mornings, school events, library days. He missed one dinner and called before Mela asked. No drama, no guilt, just presence. One afternoon, Mela handed him a folded piece of paper. Inside was a drawing of 3 figures, this time standing between 2 houses connected by a dotted line. "It means you don't live here," Mela explained, "but you didn't leave." Graham smiled. "That's exactly right." Across the room, Evelyn watched, calm, no longer guarding. The test had been passed. Spring arrived quietly. Windows opened, jackets lightened, laughter carried further. At a small school gathering, Mela stood on a low stage clutching a paper. When she finished reading, she looked into the audience, past parents, past teachers, until she found Graham. He was sitting in the smallest chair again. She smiled. Later, as they walked home, Mela slipped her hand into his. "Did I do okay? You did amazing," Graham said. Evelyn walked beside them, steady and peaceful. That evening, Mela taped a new drawing to the fridge. 3 figures under a sun, 2 houses, 1 path. "This is our family," she announced. "We chose each other." Graham felt the truth of it settle, not loudly, not dramatically, just right. He had built companies, led thousands, changed markets. But this was the first thing he chose that didn't need proof. As he left that night, Mela called after him. "See you Wednesday, I'll be there," he replied. And he was. Because real wealth wasn't found in contracts or towers or numbers. It was found in showing up. Again, and again, and again. Did this story leave a lasting impression on you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, rate it from 1 to 10, and tap the end screen to see another heartwarming story waiting for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, then tap the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. Until our next story.